Now let's look at tachographs and record keeping. A driver must inform his employer of any work for another employer, whether within or outside of the transport sector, as this may have an impact on his daily or weekly rest periods. The driver has a duty to ensure that he has enough free time every day and every week to take daily and weekly rest. In the vehicle, the driver must remember to operate the mode switch to record breaks, rest, other work, and any periods of availability, because the tachograph only records driving automatically. An analog tachograph should not be opened during the working day without a valid reason. If it is, this should be noted on the chart while the tachograph is open. When there are two drivers, the one that is actually driving must make sure that his tachograph chart is on the top. When the other driver takes over, they must change tachographs, so the one that belongs to the current driver is always on top. If using a digital card, then the driver's card must be inserted into slot 1 and the co-driver's card into slot 2. These cards must then be changed over when the drivers do. If a driver can't fit his full name on the front of the tachograph chart, it's recommended that he writes his initial and surname on the front and then writes his full name on the reverse. On the road, the driver is responsible for ensuring he has his charts with him for the current week and any charts for the previous 15 calendar days. This will change on the 1st of January 2008 to the current record and any records for the previous 28 calendar days. He must also carry his digital smart card, as well as any manual records and printouts that he may have made during this period. Drivers on AETR journeys will need to produce any records, analog, digital or manual, for the current week and the last record from the previous week in which they drove. UK drivers on journeys with a time zone change must leave the analog tachograph clock set for UK time. The clock must never be adjusted during the shift, only at the start or finish. The internal clocks of digital tachographs are set to UTC time, Universal Time Coordinated, but it is still possible to display the local time on the screen. If the recording equipment breaks down, then the driver must keep a manual record of his day. The fault must be reported to the operator as soon as possible. If the vehicle is away from base and unlikely to return within the next 7 days, then it must be fixed en route. In an emergency, a driver is permitted to breach the rules to reach the first suitable stopping place. He cannot automatically return to base. As soon as he reaches that stopping place, the driver must make a manual record to indicate the reasons and circumstances. Emergencies are defined as unforeseen circumstances and therefore cannot be worked into a driver's schedule. For example, delays caused by roadworks known about in advance would not be classed as unforeseen. VOSA traffic enforcement officers have a wide range of powers, allowing them to inspect and copy records, both analog and digital. Officers also have powers to examine other records, for example, fuel receipts and delivery paperwork. They have powers to inspect and remove tachograph equipment and suspect devices. VOSA have specially trained officers who have the power to stop and direct a vehicle. Officers can also weigh vehicles, take personal details, issue prohibitions to drivers, and are empowered to enter premises to inspect facilities or records. There are many areas that an operator should monitor. These include tachograph equipment, speed limiters, driver's hours and working time records, driver contracts, licensing and training, plating and testing, insurance, vehicle excise duty, load weights, compliance checks, vehicle condition and maintenance, and operator licensing. Operators must comply with EC and domestic regulations on driver's hours, driver's licenses, and operator licensing. They must also maintain equipment in working order and keep documentation relating to both drivers and vehicles. Documents and records relate to not only analog charts and digital records for driver's hours purposes, but also include vehicle and driver licensing related documents and records such as MOT certificates. The traffic commissioners have the power to revoke, suspend or curtail the operator's licence if they don't comply with the requirements of the licensing system. If a company continues to use a vehicle when the operator's licence has been revoked, the vehicle and any goods in it could be impounded and the assets may be lost. Holding an operator's licence means having a working system in place to ensure that the drivers keep to the hours and record-keeping rules and that the vehicles will be maintained properly and used within the weight limits. Operators must work to ensure that their drivers are keeping within the law and are obliged to organise their drivers' work within the legislation. They must not give drivers payments, such as bonuses, related to distance travelled or the amount of goods carried, if they encourage breaking the rules. Breaches of the regulations will result in prosecutions of drivers and operators, and in some circumstances, also the shipper, freight forwarder, tour operator, or any other party to the contract. The best method of ensuring compliance is for the employer to check a selection of tachograph charts from drivers on a periodic basis. This may be done by an outside agency. If drivers are using logbooks or record sheets for UK domestic hours, the operator is expected to check and sign them each week. Analogue charts, manual records, digital printouts and downloaded data must be kept by the operator for a minimum of 1 year. This increases to 2 years if the records are also being used as the only proof of compliance with the Road Transport Working Time Regulations 2005.
Morning, Carmen.
Morning.
Digital smart cards hold approximately 28 days' worth of driver information. These cards are to be downloaded on a regular basis by the operator. The operator should also download data from the individual vehicle units on a periodic basis. Driver fatigue is an extremely serious matter. A tired driver can kill, which is why these rules exist. If a driver breaks the law, then the responsibility lies with him and he will be prosecuted. But it is a dual responsibility, as operators should educate their drivers and ensure that their activities are monitored. VOSA's principal aim is to improve road safety. It has an educational advisory role to help and advise operators and drivers who are unclear about the complexity of the regulations. VOSA's examiners throughout the country are happy to offer help and advice.